Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today, we're making the Witch King mask from Lord of the Rings. So sit back, relax, and let's create together.
First step in our process was to print the file. I printed this at a 0.12 layer height using Sunlu Black PLA. I love that the file came pre-separated for smaller build volume printers. And once I got everything off the build plate, I removed the supports and got to work cleaning up the edges of the model. I'm using a deburr tool to remove small amounts of plastic left over from the brim that helps the model stick to the build plate. After that, it was time to glue it all together. Here, I'm using a product called 3D glue. This chemically welds the plastic together, creating a really strong bond. Unfortunately, as you see in a few seconds here, some of the places where the model needed to glue together didn't have a lot of surface area for the chemical reaction to take place. So I switched to using regular super glue, followed by a bead of 3D glue on the outside of the joint just to fuse it all together. I figure since this model has a lot of bumps and texture, we'd be able to easily hide most of these seams later. I'm also using small clamps very carefully to hold two pieces together. You have to be super careful here though, because you can easily crack your parts when using PLA. And with the mask all glued up, I used some glazing spot putty to fill in and mask the seams where the helmet was fused together. One thing I made sure to do was to use a good amount and then texture it with my hands to mimic the texture of the model. And I was being really careful to spread it around so it wouldn't be too noticeable. Off camera, kind of because of the way I am, I added even more spot putty to the model to fill in and add some more texture.
All right, so we've got the Witch King helmet all bondoed up. I went ahead and I put a lot of thick Bondo everywhere. As this helmet is super textured and weathered, it's beaten out of metal. I went ahead and I spread this spot glazing putty all over everything, and I made sure to leave a lot of rough areas to cover and hide some of the areas where I glued this piece together, as well as add just a tiny bit more texture to this and also hide the layer lines. So next step is gonna be primer. Let's hit it.
Now I'm spraying the helmet down with filler primer, starting with what's called a dust coat. This kind of helps make sure that it doesn't run when laying down a thicker coat. So after that dust coat, I laid on a thick wet coat of filler primer in a couple of layers, making sure to get the inside of the helmet as well. And here's what it looked like. Alright, next up was a little bit of sanding with some 120 grit sandpaper. I noticed I had some really high spots from the glazing putty, and I really wanted to knock those down to be more even with the rest of the model. All right, now it's time for flat black paint. I feel like I've only used flat black paint in the last couple videos, but stay tuned for my next prop video where I'll be going for like a mirror gloss black finish. It's gonna be awesome. So like and subscribe so you don't miss it. Okay, our next step in the process is to make this thing look like metal. I'm using silver rub and buff as well as a little bit of Spanish copper to add some depth and color to the model. One key thing to remember when using this product is to think of this as dry brushing. I'm not trying to coat the helmet in this paint. I'm simply dragging the brush along the model lightly and allowing the texture to pick up the silver color. This gives it that aged metal look by having highlights and shadows. Another tip is, on the areas I want to outline like the edges and the raised portions, I lay the rub and buff on thicker there. This helps the prop read quickly to the eye. I also realized that a lot of the inside of this mask may be seen even when worn, but especially on display. So I made sure to give the impression of metal on the inside too. And in our last step of this process, I wanted to try a new technique. So I'm adding some heavy rust to the spikes and other areas of the helmet. I'm using AK heavy rust here. How do you think it turned out? Our final step is a satin clear coat shot from my airbrush. I'm being very careful not to lay it on too thick, and I'm aiming for a very thin and even coat. From there, I'll do multiple coats to build up protection. And here's the final product. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more.